Preemptive strike. With only 2 episodes left, the producers focus on the most prominent character of the entire series.
The Enterprise is heading toward the Cardassian border for an update on what's going on in Deep Space Nine when Ro comes aboard, having been promoted to lieutenant.
When is the last time we actually saw Ro? Was it this season?
No, she was in Rascals, which was the only episode she was in season 6.
So it's extra weird that everyone is having a gigantic party for her, saying they missed her so much and they're so glad she's back.
And especially since she tended to butt heads with people and clearly is not a party kind of person.
And what about the people who leave the ship for a week, but are there all the time otherwise, and they come back after vacation? Do they have a party for them too?
Yes, that's what happens in between the episodes. That's all that happens.
Okay, that's good to know, because if it didn't, those people would probably be at the party for Ro saying, what the fuck? I thought nobody liked her. Oh, hey, Ro, it's so good to see you. Ro is super embarrassed and overwhelmed that they're celebrating her return when Picard calls her to the bridge.
It turns out he's waiting right outside the door, and he tells her how he always knew she would succeed, and blah, blah, blah.
And he called her out because he saw how uncomfortable she was. And she thanks him for everything he's done for her, which we've seen in the show throughout the past 2 seasons.
He was talking about how she set up all those parties in between the episodes. They are interrupted by Riker calling Picard about picking up a distress signal from a Cardassian ship that got cut off.
So Picard and Ro go to the bridge and discover the attacking ships are actually Federation.
And somehow Picard is able to identify them as part of the Marquis, an organization introduced in Deep Space Nine.
And the attack is in violation of the treaty between the Federation and the Cardassians.
Picard wants to stop the attack, and Riker displays his racism when he says,
I never thought we'd be firing on our own people to protect a Cardassian ship.
And instead of destroying the Marquis, they fire some torpedoes to scare them off, which I'm sure Worf was pretty upset about.
The injured Cardassians are beamed aboard, and Gulliver is skeptical of Picard's claims that Starfleet opposes the actions of the Marquis.
And he tells Picard that the Marquis are attacking them with high-end Starfleet weapons, and questions how they got them.
And he says if they're not stopped soon, things will escalate. After the Cardassians leave, Admiral Nechayev comes aboard. She tells Picard that the Cardassians have been arming their colonies in the demilitarized zone.
And I did like how she brought up the last time she was on the ship.
Yeah, how she didn't eat any of the stuff that Picard prepared for her.
And she's worried because the Marquis are moving beyond self-defense and seem to be preparing for offensive action.
She says they'll have to learn more about the Marquis, and they want to send someone from the Enterprise to infiltrate them, which of course means Ro.
Picard fills Ro in, who is hesitant about the whole thing, and says she knows some Marquis sympathizers, but she ultimately accepts, partly to validate Picard's faith in choosing her for the mission, which again we saw in supreme detail over the past 2 seasons.
Ro arrives at a Marquis base, and is not conspicuous at all with how she keeps looking around nervously.
And it's also not conspicuous how Worf and Data follow her in 3 or 4 seconds after she walks in the room.
And of course she does that movie, TV show thing where she starts making out with someone to take attention away.
Even though she's in the back corner already, and I think she's behind a giant pillar anyway.
I mean, all she had to do was go into the restroom or something and wait until they leave.
Turn around?
Worf and Data say they're looking for a Bajoran woman who killed a Cardassian, and they say that if they find out she's there, they'll close the place down. And I would think that would make the people there give her up, since they don't even know who she is yet, and they don't want things to happen to them.
But a dude at the bar says, she just left. So Worf and Data take him at his word and turn around and just leave.
It was very convincing on their part.
The whole deception was so obvious and stupid, so it fits perfectly in with this season.
Ro thanks the guy who spoke up for her, and he asks if she really killed the Cardassian, saying that many people there would support that. And when she says she'd like to meet people like that, he zaps her.
She wakes up in an interrogation room and is grilled about her past, and she conveniently has all the answers they want to hear.
Well, she was mostly telling the truth.
Oh, so you were convinced also.
She tells them who she is, and her background dealing with Cardassians, and says she left Starfleet because she didn't like how they worked with the Cardassians. She asks them if they are Marquis and says she wants to join them if they are.
They say they'll check out her story, get back to her, and then their leader takes Ro around the settlement and says Starfleet doesn't understand how life is in the demilitarized zone.
Ro says the Cardassians want to make life so unpleasant for the people there that they'll leave, and the guy says that no one sees that but the Marquis, even though it would be obvious to literally anyone. The old guy, Macius, orders Hasperat, a Bajoran dish that his friend used to make, and they bond over their love of it. It was very deep.
And salty. The other two interrogators say that Ro's story checks out, so she's invited to a meeting, just like that.
They say that they think the Cardassians are going to supply their colonists with biogenic weapons, and they should make a preemptive strike, but they don't have the medical supplies they need.
So cool how they integrated the title of the episode. This whole season is such an emergence of good writing. I suspected maybe a conspiracy. But we gotta hurry up. I gotta go play my Sega Genesis.
Ro tells them she can get medical supplies from the Enterprise, and some of them object, but Macius says they should give her a chance.
But just to make sure she's not trying to deceive them, one of the Marquis says she's gonna go with her. And on the shuttle, that woman is very suspicious that everything is going really well, and everything seems to be working out perfectly.
Over a week after Ro has left, the Enterprise picks up a distress call from a Federation science ship.
Data says they can't send any communications back to the ship because it's in an area with a protostar that emits magnoscopic interference or something. And isn't that what caused the Enterprise to become a living being last episode?
I think that was a magnetostorm. They say that'll also make it hard to detect its location, and when Data says they can use the directional array, Riker says,
Might as well break out the palm beacons and try to find them that way.
And I was really hoping we'd cut back later and see Riker standing at a window waving palm beacons around, but unfortunately that doesn't happen.
Too bad. Back in the shuttle, Ro says they'll need to take the ship inside of the Enterprise's shields to beam the medical supplies off, and she conveniently knows the best way to do that.
And their ship somehow immediately detects the Enterprise, even though the Enterprise couldn't detect the other ship.
Back on the Enterprise, Worf is looking closer at the distress call, and he sees a hidden message inside from Ro.
Data picks up their ship coming through the shields, and Picard tells him to let it through. So Ro beams medical supplies onto their ship.
And as they leave, Picard says, make it look like we're trying to stop them. But we don't actually see what that looks like or how they do that, because the scene changes.
The Marquis congratulate Ro, and Macius tells her he's known from the start that in her heart she was one of them.
And he makes some other comment about Hasperat or whatever.
And he wasn't supposed to come off as creepy, but he did.
Since they now trust Ro, they give her a ship and let her leave to go wherever she wants. So she goes straight back to the Enterprise to report to Picard. And I hope there were no homing devices or GPS beacons on every Marquis ship.
She tells him about the rumors of the Cardassians arming their colonists with biogenic weapons, and Picard tells her they want to give the Marquis a target at which they can throw a lot of their ships, so they can be taken out all at once.
So he drums up a story about different parts being delivered for the weapons to lure the Marquis into a trap.
Ro is torn, and Picard says he has to know if she has a problem with the plan, but she says even if she did have a problem, it wouldn't stop her from carrying out the mission.
And he says again how proud he is of her, and he's glad that they had all of those adventures together over the last 50 episodes.
Setting up so many parties. And I would think that giving the Marquis false information that would further cement their views of the Cardassians would be nothing but harmful, not to mention what might happen if the Cardassians found out that Starfleet was giving out information that wasn't true about them.
You're losing focus of the big picture, which is the celebration party they're all going to have once everything is done.
Oh, that's right.
Ro goes back to the settlement and relays the story about the weapons, and the leaders of the settlement determined that a convoy heading to deliver Cardassian supplies needs to be stopped, but they'll need a bunch of ships to do it.
And this time, Ro even brings the Paklids, Ferengi, and Euridians into the story, so this one lie could lead to war between so many different groups. What if the Marquis start attacking all of those? But Picard didn't think about that.
Later, Ro and Macius are further bonding over Hasperat again.
And he comes off as creepy again, with how he stares at her, and talks about how they'll dance. Whether he means the two of them or everybody, doesn't matter.
He's just looking forward to the victory party, and Ro says, you know what, that was my primary job in Starfleet, so I will help you set that up.
And they even bond over Macias playing the same instrument that Ro's father played for her. And she tells an emotional story about her father and how he's dead now.
And Macias says, you know what? Let's celebrate right now. And when Ro says, celebrate what? He says, nothing.
And he even takes her hand, becoming creepier and creepier all the time.
As they walk off, some monks from Mortal Kombat sneak in, pull off their hoods, but it's actually Cardassians, not Johnny Cage.
And they start zapping everyone. Ro helps fight them off, but Macias gets hit. And before he dies, he says that when an old fighter dies, someone else steps in to take his place.
Someone else has to make the Hesprat. At this point, the episode starts to completely fall apart, because we see the same bar from the beginning, but Ro has requested a meeting with Picard, and he's there in disguise, meaning he's wearing a shirt. And no one seems to recognize the captain of the flagship of Starfleet.
In the middle of a place full of former Starfleet personnel. And we find out why Patrick Stewart wanted to direct this episode when Michelle Forbes has her hands all over him as she tells him that the Marquis aren't falling for the trap.
Luckily, the camera stays above the table so we can't see his raging erection below.
That was part of his disguise. He wasn't wearing pants. Everybody knows that Picard always wears pants.
Ro tells Picard they need to abandon the mission, and lies, saying the Maquis have determined the convoy is too big.
She says they don't want to focus all their resources in one place, but Picard says that runs counter to all the other info Starfleet is getting. She says she doesn't know if she can go through with the mission, and he tells her that she would be in big trouble if she sabotages it.
It would destroy her entire future.
And they'd have to get someone else to set up the parties.
Picard says, just to be sure everything's cool, he'll have Riker go back to the settlement with Ro, saying, oh yeah, here's my random-ass brother. And outrageously, it does apparently work. Which, again, we don't see it, but we just cut to Ro and Riker sitting in a shuttle together.
When the Maquis ships head to attack the convoy, Ro holds Riker at phaser point. She fires a beam from the ship into the nebula that exposes the Starfleet ships that are hiding, causing the Maquis to call off the attack and turn back.
Like the cockroaches they are, scattering in the light. Hail Cardassia!
Ro tells Riker to tell Picard that she's sorry, and has the Maquis beam her out.
Riker relays Ro's message to Picard, who sits solemnly at this unprecedented betrayal by his best friend, who we've seen bond through countless adventures over the past 50 episodes.
Is that actually how you took his reaction, though? I took it as he was conflicted.
Maybe conflicted about the party.
Yeah, he's thinking about now having Troy in charge of all that. He's like, oh, damn it. I'm glad there's only one episode left, is what he's thinking.
Preemptive strike. overall?
It was an interesting choice to do a Ro episode right before the end of the entire show, especially since we haven't seen her in forever. The plot of this episode was better than most of the ones we've been getting lately. It didn't focus on fake science bullshit, it actually had a character arc, and it fleshed out the world of the show a bit. If only they had taken that approach with more episodes this season. There were still dumb things in there, like Picard going undercover again, and the individual Marquis members were pretty simplistic, with Macias being the only one with development and still coming out very stereotypical and generic. I was surprised that we didn't get more of the Cardassians at the end as a way of ratcheting up the tension. I expected them to show up when the Marquis were about to attack the convoy, but they didn't. The entire plan for how to get the Marquis was extremely questionable, potentially doing nothing but escalating things if it failed, and they were unclear as to whether they were going to outright attack the Marquis and kill them and destroy the ships, or just try to capture them. They didn't really explain anything. It felt like we weren't supposed to think about a lot of those parts of the episode too much. I hope that the fake information they were given comes up in Deep Space Nine, but I highly doubt that it will. I guess Ro could have told them the truth after this, but still. And I already know that Ro, unfortunately, does not appear in Deep Space Nine, so that sucks. And this episode was also pretty predictable throughout the entire thing. But I didn't think it was bad. I thought it was a lot better than most of the ones we've been getting. I thought the central conflict was interesting, although they could have developed it a lot better, I think. Maybe if the Marquis weren't so simplistic and stereotypical. But I did enjoy this episode overall. I gave it a B-.
I gave it a C+. This episode would have worked better if Ro had shown up before the penultimate episode of the entire series, just to remind us that she existed, because she was a big deal when she was introduced. And it's like the writers realize, crap, we only have one more episode, and it has to be the finale, and it can't be about Ro, so let's just stick her in here to give her some kind of wrap-up. And everything she did with the Marquis was so overtly suspicious, and everyone called her out on it too, but then just shrugged and said, I guess we believe you, ? They even say things like, I thought you were crazy, but you knew exactly what to do, and everything was set up perfectly to accomplish our goals because you were here to do it. I also think this episode was better than the ones we've had in the past. It was an actual story that actually gave me a reason to care about it. And I wonder if anybody at any point talked to Ro saying, this might sound weird, but just a few months ago, we all turned into frogs and spiders and cavemen. Maybe that's why she felt super uncomfortable at that party, because she read about it before she got there. Yeah, it was really awkward when she was really uncomfortable and she said, God, I don't really want to be at this party. I'd rather be sprayed in the face with acid. Oh, I'm so sorry, Beverly. I didn't see you standing there. I also thought it was very risky that Picard was willing to potentially start a war between all of these different factions, not just the Cardassians, with his deception. And it seems like he made this decision on his own, not conferring with Starfleet intel like he would for pretty much everything else.
It was unclear, but yeah, he did talk to Nechayev early on, so maybe they formulated the plan. I don't know.
That rogue captain. It's probably the Borg influence.
Yeah, maybe the whole thing was secretly a Borg plan to take everybody else out. This whole thing has been just a long game being played by the Borg.
So we've only got one episode left of this whole series. We've almost made it. We started reviewing this series
25 years ago.
Actually, it was 3 or 4 years. And, back when we started, we were dumb, didn't know what we were doing. And now we're dumb, don't really know what we're doing. So let's get to it. All good things.
Can't wait.